This is Indy with TGN. What's up everyone? How was everyone's first week in Firelands? Hopefully the new content has been fun and your guilds have been successful in downing a couple of these bosses, maybe even all of them. So with that said, this week's Q&A is more like one Q with a bunch of A's and generally just a bunch of QQ because folks were talking about priests and cloth spirit gear. Now, it's no surprise, it's been all over the forums. I've had a flood of questions about this, so that's why this whole episode is just going to be focusing on this one thing. Priests are complaining, mainly holy priests, that there is a drought of cloth spirit gear. There's nothing for them other than tier gear. Now, first what I'm going to do before answering any questions or giving any opinions is show you guys what is available. Now guys, let's start out with the Avengers of Hyjal Quartermaster. Available at Friendly is a Spirit Cloth Cape, and it does have Mastery as a secondary stat. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail with which stat is going to benefit which spec of Priest. I know we'll have our different opinions, but I'm just going to cover what's available in Spirit gear. Now the belt does not have spirit, so the next available item would be a Revered, and it is a trinket with 383 spirit. It has an on-use effect for an intellect buff. I'm not crazy about on-use trinkets, and Disc Priest will probably skip this one, but it is a spirit item available should Holy Priests want to consider it. Now the next thing down the list is at Exalted, and it's actually a pretty nice ring here. It's got 185 spirit, a red socket, and it has Mastery as a secondary stat. Now these items are all available through Avengers of Hyjal Reputation. Now let's visit the Valor Point vendor, starting with the ring that you can get for 1250 points. This has spirit and crit rating. Also for 1250 points you'll find a neck piece that has spirit and mastery rating. Also 1250 points will be the bracers that have spirit and haste rating. The wand will cost you 700 points and that has spirit and mastery. And finally, all of your tier pieces are purchasable here at the vendor as well. Purchasable via points are the chest, gloves, and leg pieces. Moving on to the drops that we'll find inside the raid instance, all three of them. The first thing we see in the dungeon journal is the mace that drops from Ragnaros with spirit and haste. The next thing we find is an offhand that has spirit and haste, and this drops from Shanix. Finally, we find a neck piece that has spirit and mastery, and this comes from Rhyolith. Now there's 4 pieces if you count the helm with the random enchant that also drops off of Rhyolith, but this may or may not include spirit. Finally, there's 2 cloth tailoring patterns for spirit gear. The first one is for feet that includes spirit and haste, and also the second one for gloves includes spirit and haste as well. Okay, so let's quickly recap on the items we've covered so far. Now I may or may not have forgotten a few, not sure about that, but what I've been able to find so far in game are these items. Your tier pieces, of course, are your helm, shoulder, chest, glove, and legs. The items you can purchase via Valor Points are your bracers, neck, ring, and wand. The rep items are your cloak, trinket, and ring. Then crafted by tailors, you can find boots and gloves. And then boss drops finally will include the neck, helm, offhand, and mace. Now remember, the helm piece is a random enchant, so it may or may not include spirit when it does drop. Okay, so now, without taking into consideration the secondary stats on each individual item and how you would use it with your spec, we count 18 items with spirit. Now, it is no secret, it's no surprise that there are a plethora of cloth items as well as caster weapons that lack spirit. However, the secondary stats would benefit you. In other words, there's no hit, but there's also no spirit. What I've gathered from both sides of the fence here on either side of this argument are people who don't care or don't mind, and they state that either it doesn't matter because intellect increases your mana regen anyways, reforging and gemming should make any cloth piece molded to the wearer. In essence, all of these recustomization features that were implemented into the game should make it a non-issue. Some people are suggesting that priests no longer need spirit at all. And then there's people who are saying not every piece of gear necessarily needs spirit. So, while you might have spirit on most of your items, that doesn't mean that every item needs spirit to be considered a best-in-slot piece. Let's jump onto the other side of this fence. Now, there are a lot of angry priests out there, primarily holy priests, but priests in general. And then other classes are chiming in. Mages and warlocks, cloth casters that don't heal, are saying, well, hey, this is really kind of messed up also, because this is the gear that we're going to want to roll on, and now we're going to have to share it with the healing priests. So the arguments from this side are that, holy priests are going to suffer from this. They're going to be a less desired healing class because they're going to have crap regen and they're just going to keep getting weaker and weaker. Other people are saying that, every other healing class has their own healing gear that's like tailored to them. Why priests? Why is Blizzard all of a sudden picking on priests? It's also being suggested that many priests are going to be stuck in their 4-piece tier 11 because of all this, and the 4-piece tier 11 is essentially a 540 spirit buff. Now, also, people are saying, this is horrible, we're getting no choices whatsoever, we're being so limited, and, there's no real options anymore. And because of this, because priests are going to be kind of pigeonholed into being forced into taking all their tier gear, they're going to gear up much slower, because not only are they going to compete with, the other casters for the non-spirit gear that they might want, they're going to be competing with warlocks and paladins for their tier pieces. And so they're just going to gear up much slower, and they're going to be left in the dust by all the other healers. So essentially, priests are feeling very singled out by this. Now, having heard both of the arguments and having done a lot of reading, on this topic, and just seeing how people feel, and then going and doing the research myself and seeing what's out there and what really would be applicable to both priest specs, my stance on this topic is this: I don't think it's as huge a deal as it's being made. Yes, there is less to choose from, and yes, there's cloth gear out there with no hit but also with no spirit. Do I think that healing priests should be able to roll on this gear that has everything minus the spirit that they could use according to their spec? Absolutely. Do I think that that's going to upset a lot of cloth DPS casters? Of course. There's always going to be somebody upset over gear. Now, that being said, I think Blizzard intended this to happen. I think that they put this gear out there without hit, saying this isn't specifically for you, DPSers. Priests should be able to take this gear if it's got intellect, stam, and haste and mastery, or spell power and mastery, and say that's perfect for my spec. The only thing it's lacking is spirit. Well, then you have a decision to make, and I think that that's the beauty of this game, is that there's always decisions to make. Now, I don't feel that every piece of gear has to have spirit on it. Sure, it's beneficial, but it's not like you couldn't take that piece of gear that has intellect, stamina, mastery, and spell power and tweak some things so that you're still comfortable mana-wise. Now, that being said, priests are absolutely going to go for their tier set bonus, because tier 12, the 2-piece, has a mana regen bonus, and then the 4-piece has this awesome buff that is a little cauterizing flame that just kind of spits out free heals. So, I mean, free heals that are costing you no mana is essentially, if you think about it, better than that tier 11 set bonus, because I would trade that 540 spirit easily to get a buff on my healing that puts out all these free heals across raid members. So just weigh the pros and the cons. It's not going to be easy street gearing up. Yes, you might be a little bit slower getting all your tier pieces, and yes, there's probably going to be a lot of debates going back and forth between, the healing priests and the cloth DPS, and who should get what. But when it comes down to it, just do your research ahead of time. Say, based on my spec and my raid performance and the role that you fill most of the time, how do you feel about your own mana regen? Are you comfortable? Are you hurting? And just kind of map it out ahead of time. There's plenty of sites out there where you can kind of tweak your reforges and your spec and your stats. and just kind of find out what you want to end up with, and have that in mind when you're rolling or bidding on your gear. Now, hopefully this clears up a little bit regarding this huge debate that's going back and forth. There's not like two pieces out there for you. There's certainly more than that, but there's also going to be some obstacles and decisions for each and every priest healer. Well, guys, good luck in Firelands raiding. Hopefully everyone's having a great time in this new content. Again, this is Indy, and thanks for watching.